everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with a Super GT race taking place at Suzuka. We're driving the Lexus for this race. Last time we did the race here, we drove the I drove the Honda NSX, which did really well, but I wanted to go back to this car. This was the car that when I first drove, I described it as probably my favourite car in the game, and it pretty much is. It just feels so enjoyable to drive. So we're starting from pole position in this with a 1:48.4, pretty much identical lap time to what we did with the NSX. There was a little bit more potential with this also. I didn't quite hook the lap up, but it was a reasonably good lap, as you can see there. The race has started. We've got 20 drivers, I think, in this race. Quite a mixture in the field. There was some NSXs, some a majority were driving the Lexus. So for some reason, it all switched around at this race. Last time I was here, everyone was in the NSX. Now everyone's driving the Lexus. So it just shows you, I think the people at the top leaderboard have quite a lot of fun in just picking a car, because the BOP is so matched in this that people just tend to follow what's at the top. I wanted to go back to this car anyway purely because I've done the NSX last time, but they're very equal. But you can see there straight away, put under a lot of pressure from P2. Getting really close. So what I needed to do was try and break the slipstream on this race. You can see they've put me under a lot of pressure going through these opening corners. I didn't want to push too hard on the first lap of that opening few corners, as if you make a little mistake you can lose a lot of time, and obviously I didn't want to just drop back down. So you can see there, pushed very hard under the bridge though, and got myself a little bit of a gap going into the tight hairpin. You can see visually there's a gap. P3 very close to P2 also, putting a lot of pressure on Burrs in P2. And we're there just with a little bit of a gap, just to give myself a little bit of a comfort zone in the braking areas. He was obviously, once he was in the slipstream though, he was picking that up still, because he's still within a second of us, myself there. You can see there 8 tenths behind, I think it is 6-7 tenths behind. And then going down this straight, he's going to probably pick that up and start homing in a bit when we get on the straight. You can see there, trying to get on the pound nice and early. You can see I'm doing fuel saving. I've got the fuel mixture in 2 there. I think at this point I forgot to put it into 1. See there, I went to 1. I actually forgot on that straight, which gave him quite a big slipstream. You can see there he caught quite a lot up and got the gap down to 3 tenths, and that was my error. I just genuinely forgot to take it off of the 2 because I was using it through the twisty section. But then again, putting it back down to 2, I was trying to get some fuel saving done through the corners with this car, because I knew that with Burrs behind me, if he's in the slipstream, he's going to be able to do more fuel saving. So while I wasn't out the slipstream, I decided to try and break the slipstream while trying to do fuel saving. So you can see there, back into fuel mixture 2 for these corners. Again, I really do enjoy driving this car. It feels so nice to be pushing this car to its limits around this track, throwing it into the corners. Engine sounds amazing. I really do enjoy driving this car. You can see there visually on the top right hand corner, he's just about staying in the slipstream. You can see I'm managing to pull a little bit away from him in these twisty sections with still using 2 mixture. So I'm managing to do a bit of fuel saving. You can see the gear changes also are not too aggressive. Also, I'm not revving the car out too much, as I want to try and save some fuel for the pit stop, just in case he's managed to save quite a lot. And then going into this right hander under the bridge, I was very confident with the Lexus and pushing really far out wide and getting on the pound nice and early on that corner, and it seemed to give me a little bit of a boost accelerating out of there compared to P2. As you can see there in the top right hand corner, myself and P2 starting to pull away a bit there. P3 dropped back a bit. It looks like P3 has lost the slipstream, so we're going to ride on board now with P2, putting myself under a lot of pressure. You can see he's in the slipstream and he's trying to build on that slipstream and get as close as he can. It's really hard for me to break the slipstream, both in similar cars, so once he's in my slipstream he can start closing in, and it was difficult to try and break that slipstream. You can see I'm on the power very early and start pulling away there, but then once he's back in the slipstream he can start closing in and making that gap really small. So it's hard to break the slipstream when you've got a very fast driver behind you. You can see I'm trying to drive as smooth as I can and trying to get some good exits from corners to try and get rid of that slipstream. Going through the chicane again, you can see he's very close, so he's going to get my slipstream a lot now, especially how much time he gained on that chicane. He really did cut that chicane a bit, got away with it, and he's in the slipstream. I go over to the right hand side, but don't really need to go to too defensive. You can see there, I get myself back over to the racing line, as there's not really an overtaking opportunity there, as he just tucks in behind us and back in that slipstream. So again, trying to push really hard through these twisty sections, using that fuel mixer 2 as much as I physically could to try and lose him while saving fuel. That was the only way I could really do it, because if I just used 1 mixture, I felt it wouldn't really gain me too much time, but I would probably use too much fuel, and then when we come to the pits I didn't want to be jumped by P2. So you can see there trying to push fairly hard. You can see visually there again, this game just looks amazing. it still amazes me how good this game looks when you're watching these replay cameras. You can see they're pushing hard under the bridge again, going under the bridge through the shadows, and we've got a little bit of a gap there, getting very close to breaking that slipstream, you can see. So I think at this stage I might have went a little bit more aggressive with the fuel mixture to try and get rid of it. While I could see there was a gap visually building up, I think I started to push. As you can see there, P3, 4, very close to Bears in P2, so it's still got 4 or 5 cars very close together. Myself trying to pull away, but you can see I've actually lost the slipstream, using that one mixture to try and break it. Once I felt there was a chance to break it, go straight away with the aggressive use of one mixture, and then staying in one mixture through the corner, that long left hand corner onto this back straight to try and build up the gap here more. And you can see visually now on the delta it's 1.2 seconds, and it's increasing as we look at the cars go past on that camera angle. I do like that camera angle on the replay. And then again through the sector on my personal best of the race. First lap out after lap 1 minute 50.5. Nothing special, but you've seen doing a lot of fuel saving on that, and also at the start of this lap we were doing fuel saving, so the lap times are not too amazing, but it's consistency that I wanted in this first stint, trying to maintain the laps fairly close together. You can see again there another 1 minute 50.5. I think the first one was a 1 minute 50.6 and a 1 minute 50.5, so reasonably consistent, and we still got Bears out the slipstream 1.2 seconds ahead. And then now I can still do my fuel saving without losing too much time, because I was generally noticing that I was able to pull away a bit through this section of the track. The first sector all the way up to the bridge was generally quite strong for myself, so I carried on doing the fuel saving. I'm not sure whether Bears was possibly using one mixture on this, but you can see I go through that sector with a purple split, so that's the best sector of the race, and then going onto these 2 fast right hand corners, trying to push reasonably hard, obviously not taking too many risks. You can see they're using some of the curb, going down, braking very early into 3rd gear. Braking early gives you a much better exit from the corners. You can see there I have a massive moment and somehow managed to catch that. That was extremely close. I did think that the car was just going to snap on me then, and unfortunately that gives Bears the slipstream again. So that hard work I had done to get rid of the slipstream lost there, as it was a real close moment, and I don't know how I managed to save that. It was a very, very scary moment, but we're still in P1 and just closing in on breaking that slipstream again. You can see just somehow got it to a second again, but all that hard work I'd done in them first 3 laps disappeared pretty much by one stupid mistake where I tried to push too hard out the exit. Because I braked so early, I really got the power really early and just tried to push the limits a little bit too far coming out of that corner. But luckily I've got the gap back up to 1.1 seconds and lost that slipstream straight away. So that was good to see, and so I'm in the fuel mixture 2 again, trying to save a bit of fuel, as I know that I'm going to have to do a bit of fuel saving, because if he's not worried about using one mixture too much, when we come to the pit stop phase there's a good chance I might lose quite a bit of time in the pit. So this lap now I need to go really aggressive. You can see there, lost nearly over half a second, nearly 6-7 attempts on that one lap, where we were obviously purple going through that middle the first sector split, and then I lost that big chunk of time, probably 6, maybe 7-8 tenths of a second, just by running wide and nearly losing the rear end. But luckily now, going through these corners, you can visually see behind myself in the mirror, when you look on the in-car mirror, you can see Bears falling back a little bit there, 1.4, 1.3 seconds behind, and I'm starting to push really hard, even though we're using that fuel mixture 2. The car's obviously getting lighter, tyre wear's kicking in a little bit obviously, but the tyre wear on the Super GT cars is fairly good. They can last quite a while and they still give plenty of grip. So going through the fast right hander again, we're going to make sure this time I don't push too hard. So you can see there, giving a lot more respect and not using hardly anywhere near as much track as what I was doing. Just wanted to get through that corner clean. We've got that gap. I've got that gap up to 1.6 seconds, I think it is there. Starting to pull away. So now need to accelerate really hard in first gear, in one mixture, and try and build that gap up now for when we pit. So you can see I'm going to use one mixture up this hill to make sure that I can accelerate out and build up as much speed as possible, and then into fuel mixture 2 for this left hander, as one mixture and 2 mixture on these type of corners isn't going to make much of a difference in terms of your lap time. It will make fractions difference, not a massive amount. As long as you're back into one mixture for the straights, that's where you want it for, when you put the power down and accelerate, and that's where your time will come by using one mixture. But through corners like that, you're not going to gain a massive amount by using 1/2. So that's why I was using 2 on that corner. As I've got that gap over 2 seconds now, so trying to make sure I get a nice clean entry and exit from this chicane, and then into the pits we're going to go now. I'm going to go and we're going to have a little look where Burrs is. You can see we're riding on board with Burrs also in that top right hand corner to compare the pit stops. He's managed to save 5% more fuel, but that's okay because I had to break the slipstream twice, so I done an okay job with the fuel on that opening stint, and I've got a 2 second advantage, so we should come out in front as long as he doesn't try and undercut us too much. So let's have a little look now as I'm going to put the fuel in, then we're going to jump on board with Burrs and watch as he's putting his fuel in. You can see there he's out the pits, and we're going to run on board, and you can see fractionally out in front, so he must have under-fueled quite a bit there, I feel, because 5% fuel advantage doesn't equate to 2 seconds in pit stop time. So my guess is he cut his pit stop short by quite a bit to try and get in my slipstream again, or to try and undercut me and get ahead of me and then make it hard for me to pass. But straight away you can see there I'm trying to pull away. You can see we're riding on board with Burrs now as I'm trying to pull away from that slipstream and break it straight away. That was what I knew that what he would have done was under fueled in that pit stop, so the best thing I can try and do is try and break the slipstream as early as possible, because if I can get him to be pushing as hard as he can, he's going to be using his fuel up a little bit more than what he'd like, and that's going to cost him the last lap. He's just going to have to do massive fuel saving, because if he's trying to push really hard to stay in the slipstream, he's going to be using his fuel up. And I had an idea that he probably did do a very short fuel up in that pits, which would probably mean he was going to have to do some fuel saving towards the end, as you can see there. But jumping on board with the replay cameras there, jumping onto the TV replay cameras, and you can see there he's very close still. He's not really too close to make any sort of move, so this isn't bad for myself at this point of the race, because I can push really hard in one mixture. I've got the fuel to do it. I pitted enough with, and I put enough fuel in to pretty much get myself to the end by using one mixture with just the odd amount of two mixes. You can see I go defensive over to that left hand side, then get myself back onto the racing line, and we're going back into the final chicane again as I try to take this reasonably easy. I don't go too aggressive on the curbs. You can see Burrs MP2 much more aggressive over the curves and trying to push really hard. Coming through the final corner, still very close. You can see there the gap is only around maybe 6-7 tenths of a second, if that, maybe short of half a second or so. Going into turn one again, trying to push really hard now. We've got to try and build that gap up. You can see I'm in one mixture. You can see I've still got 4.1 laps of fuel left with only 4 laps to go, so I've got the fuel to pretty much run this one mixture to the end, so I'd give myself a good advantage in terms of fuel. He was going to, obviously, he tried to undercut me in the pits, it didn't work, and now I've got more fuel and the ability to run that one mixture pretty much to the end. We're now going to just keep the onboard footage now right to the end of the race, as I'm just going to try and build up enough of a lead to break that slipstream and make Burrs try and use as much fuel as he can. That was the aim. Try and make him pretty much so he can't run this pace to the end. So you can see me pushing fairly hard now, trying to get a fairly fast lap in to try and really use his fuel up and make sure that that last lap he's not going to have fuel left to put any sort of challenge on myself. You can see I got the gap up to 1.1 seconds, but had a little moment come out the tight hairpin, but fortunately got on the power reasonably well, and you can see that gap increasing to 1.1 seconds now as I'm starting to build up that lead and pretty much getting a comfort zone building now, so that he can't really put any moves on me. You can see he's not close enough to get anywhere near my rear of my car in any braking zones. So now he's gonna have to, if he wants to get a win in this race, he's got to push really hard, and that's what I really wanted to do, is make sure that he's going to use all his fuel up. You can see my fuel's still reasonably okay, 3.3 laps to go, going into the final chicane on lap 7. You can see there braking nice and early, making sure I hit the apex reasonably well, taking quite a bit of curb this time, and again on that time getting on the power reasonably well, staying over to the right hand side, trying to shorten the distance to the finishing line. As you can see, I felt like I was on a reasonable lap, and I go over the line just short of a 1 minute 49, so 1 minute 50.002, and that's the fastest lap of the race, and just 9 tenths ahead of Burrs, as he's just about in that slipstream again. He obviously really attacked the final chicane to try and get himself very close to slipstream, but this is what I wanted, to be using his fuel up, because I know I've got the fuel. I wasn't convinced at this stage that he would have the fuel with how short his pit stop was. It was pretty much impossible that he could have had the fuel with only having the 5% advantage in the pits. As you can see again, he must be doing the fuel saving through the twisty sections at this point, because we're building that lead up and it's now up to 1.2, nearly 1.3 seconds as we're going to these two fast right hand corners now before we go under the bridge. And you can see they're staying in third gear, trying to push hard on the exit, and you can see again he's dropping back a little bit, but he's still 1.1 seconds. He seems to gain in certain spots and I seem to pull away in certain spots. It seems to be fairly equal. However, when the fuel saving that he's got to do kicks in, you'll see visually on the delta it will start dropping back a bit, as you can see there on the top right corner. If you look at the TV replay camera, you'll just see how he's just creeping in on the bottom of the screen, so you can visually see that he's not going to be getting any draft from myself now. And if I can just keep it clean and just keep the car on the track all the way to the end, we should be able to get a victory in this race. As I'm just trying, I'm not pushing too aggressive. You can see I'm changing gear, just trying to make sure that I've got the fuel, because it wasn't, even though it says 2.3 there, I know if you rev these Super GTs, that's when they use a lot of fuel. So I was just being a little bit cautious with the gear changes, trying not to use too much. I wanted to make sure that if he was saving fuel at this stage for a last lap burst, that I would have enough to cover him off with full usage of the revs, just so that I could defend with everything that I've got. As you can see there again, through the chicane he seems really strong, gets that gap down very close to being under 1 second again, but he's just not getting close enough to really pick up the slipstream. Again, through this sector is where he's probably going to be doing his fuel saving. You'll visually see that delta go up again, as he got very close to 1.2 seconds, but he must take a different line to what I take through there. As I gain from him, he then closes in, and then on the exit I seem to gain a bit with the exit speed. So it's all different types of lines we both take through the corners. You can see it's just keeping the delta around 1 second to 1.1 seconds, but he's definitely keeping me 100% honest in this race. I'm pushing really hard, obviously changing gear just short of the rev range. I'm not extending the gears fully at this point. Obviously I want to make sure that I've got that fuel for the final lap if I need to use it. As I get the lead up now to 1.3 seconds, really took a lot of speed under the bridge then, and managed to pull out a little bit more of an advantage, and then on the power really early into second gear, and I've got that gap up to 1.5 seconds now. So it looks like the fuel saving that Bird is having to do is starting to kick in. It looks like he's having to start using different mixtures on some of the straights now to make sure he gets to the end, as he obviously doesn't want to come to a situation where he's on the final lap and runs out and loses P2. So you can see there 1.5 seconds on the final, on the back straight for the on the penultimate lap. 1 lap to go after we go over the line now, and it's 1.5 seconds to the lead to P2. So this has been a great battle. Again, this is what I say about GT Sport. Every race you go in, it's very unlikely that you're going to get in a race where you just dominate from start to finish, unless you're one of the really fast ones like Mura or someone like that, RC Mura, who pretty much, or TRL Lightning, you know, you're going to always have a battle on your hands. As you can see there, I've got the lead up now to 1.7 seconds, approaching 2 seconds now. So this is what I was pretty confident would happen, and it's what I wanted to happen. This is why I was pushing so hard on the early phase to try and use up the fuel that he would have, and it seems to have worked. You can see the gap's up to 2 seconds now and 2.1 seconds. So you can visually see by the delta the way it's changing. He must be doing some drastic fuel saving to make sure he gets to the end. He's obviously, his plan was probably to jump me in the pits, and then he would try and defend it as much as possible. Obviously if you're ahead, it's always best to be ahead, but I feel like the amount of fuel I put in just was pretty much perfect. It was close to getting undercut on the pits, but I judged it pretty well. And then the strategy to run really aggressive, as pretty much used all the fuel he had up. As you can see there, the gap now 2.5 seconds, and I'm just trying to keep the car on the track now, not push too hard. You can see lap 9 at 151.2, the first lap out of the 1 minute 50s. The consistency was really good all the way up to that point. It was a 50.5, 50.5, 51.2 sorry on lap 4, which was just before we pitted, and then a 50.0, 50.4, and then again a 51.2 on lap 9. So reasonable consistency. Couple of little errors like that. I think lap 4 was the lap that I possibly made that big error. It was the lap that the rear end went on my car, and we lost about 0.8 of a second. So that lap probably would have been a reasonably good lap if it wasn't for that error. As you can see now, going on the back straight for the final time, I've nearly got the lead up to 3 seconds now, so I can afford to take it reasonably easy. You can see I've got fuel mixture 2 just to make sure I had enough fuel left there pretty much. anyway, but just using fuel mixture 2 just to make sure that I don't run out before the line. There's no point taking any risk with a lead of nearly 3 seconds. Going through the final chicane for the final time on the power nice and early, back into one mixture because I can see visually that I had enough fuel, 0.2 laps of fuel, so I had enough to get over the line, and I take the victory by 2.6 seconds. So fairly comfortable in the end, and I think I ran the right strategy of pushing really hard when we came out the pits to try and use this fuel up. So a great race, another really enjoyable race, and when I was involved with it, it was quite intense. You know, he was keeping me honest pretty much throughout the whole race. It was just that final lap that he had to drop back really and save the fuel. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that race. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Super GT cars, I really enjoy driving them, the Group 2 cars. Great fun to drive, and that Lexus again probably is my favourite car in the game. I really enjoy the way it handles. I like the way you can put the power down. I like the front end on it. You know, it's a really good balanced car in this game. So anyway guys, thanks again for watching this video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up if you've enjoyed that. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed. Click that notification button so you don't miss any future videos. I upload every single day on GT Sport, and obviously some other games as well every now and then. Thanks again for watching everyone.